We're live.
Did you read it?
I sent him the link, so he could put it up on there.
All right, thank you. We'll now have the roll call of members of the board. Please state your name and whether or not you have any conflict of interest with any of the matters before us this afternoon.
Holly Powell, no conflict.
Martin Carpenter, no conflict.
Bob Howell, no conflict.
Antoinette Kelly, no conflict.
Susan T. Adams, no conflict.
All right, thank you. We'll enter the public comment section before we begin. In the agenda, there is a synopsis of the highlights. Just a reminder, this section will last a total of 15 minutes. Each person has up to 3 minutes to make his comments or her comments. Please address the board as a whole rather than any individual or making any comments to other folks in the public section of the seating. And the board is certainly interested in your observations. We may, at the appropriate time, but are not required to respond to any of the comments from the public. And since it's maybe been a while since we've reiterated some of the guidelines, this is one of those statements that's probably superfluous, but I'm going to go ahead and read it anyway, just as a reminder for the tone that we're interested in. Speakers will be courteous in their language and presentation. Matters or comments which are harmful, discriminatory, or embarrassing to any citizens, official, or employee of Moore County shall not be allowed. Speakers must be respectful and courteous in their remarks and must refrain from personal attacks and the use of profanity. And I don't believe anyone arrived here with the intent of making those kind of comments or of disrupting the matter before the board in any way. But as a reminder also to hold your any kind of comments, speaking, whispering among the public to a minimum, because inadvertently that can be distracting as well. So we really appreciate that. For our speakers today, the first citizen on the list is Mr. Maurice Holland. Holland? And when you arrive, as Ms. Dixon is getting ready for with the microphone. So thank you, Maurice.
Thank you, Chairman Howell. I want to speak on the agenda item pertaining to the East Aberdeen polling place. I am the East Aberdeen precinct chair for the Democratic Party. I'm also a registered voter in East Aberdeen. I've been a registered voter in East Aberdeen going all the way back to when I first registered to vote, and our former director, Glenda Clinton-Denon, administered back then what the voters had to take an oath, and I did that at the age of 18 in 1982. The East Aberdeen location was that polling place then, and it's served, and I actually worked as a judge in 2012 in the East Aberdeen precinct. And in 2012, East Aberdeen, there are about 800 people that voted in 2012 on election day. And in 2024, if you look at the results that are on the state board's website, there are 604 people that voted on election day. So that's a 25% decrease in 12 years. I understand that you all are saying that it's inadequate, but your alternative is problematic also. It's problematic, first of all, because it's on an obscure street over on Maple Street, where people have to cross the main line of CSX and also Aberdeen and Rockfish railroads. So there's 5 grade crossings that they have to cross to get to that location. It would be problematic for longtime residents because it would be a change, and it's not a prominent location. Also, there's some issues that had been brought up about just sort of the layout. One of the ways to handle that is to move the curbside voting back to Pine Street and to label it and to mark it off. Also for the electioneering area, if it is marked that that is electioneering and there's adequate space, that would solve a lot of the problems that you have there. But otherwise, and also with you taking this up, even in speaking with Mayor Farrell, and I've spoken with him twice in the last 2 days. But the thing is, I believe that most of the precinct is not aware of what you're planning on doing if you're going to move this location. And then lastly, I do not support adding any more religious institutions as polling sites. You have a problem already as far as. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Next on the list, we have Ms. Carol Wielden.
Thank you. At the board meeting that Tawana presented the site alternatives for East Aberdeen, she indicated the site met all of the board requirements: space, parking, room for tents and signs, and safety. A new site is needed as the current site is inadequate to continue service due to increased voter population. After the meeting, I heard Mr. Maurice Holland state to his members of the board that Democrats will not vote in an evangelical church. I was stunned, even more stunned when his members did not take exception to his remarks. The Board of Elections currently uses the facilities of several churches on election day. No church services are provided to voters, and I doubt the voters neither know nor care what the domination of the church is. Moore County does not have that many large locations to accommodate voters on election day. If Democrats will not vote in an evangelical church, I suggest they take advantage of the early voting or request a mail-in ballot. I believe it is a job description of the staff of the Board of Elections to find suitable sites for public voting and for the board to approve or disapprove. The public does not have the knowledge or the need to get involved, although recommendations, I'm sure, are always appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wielden. And last for the session is Ms. Teresa Beavers.
Hey, I won't be long. I came on behalf of, I am a precinct chair for the Republican Party for East Aberdeen. I live in East Aberdeen. And we were all pretty shocked when we found out they were going to move it, because after talking with people on both sides of the aisle, we've never really seen a concern with parking. I mean, it is growing. I will say that, because I know where I live in my neighborhood is usually going to have 700 homes. We're not there yet, but it's coming, you know. So, I mean, I know there's probably going to be a time that we will have to move just because of the population growth on that side of town. Because as a town board commissioner, there are several developments that are in the works right now. Several, you know, like at least two on 15501, which is smack dab in the middle of East Aberdeen. So with that understanding, I see it coming. On the other note, as a voter, I like the location of where it is presently because it is visible. It's there on Main Street. Everybody comes through there if they're going into town. Some people forget to vote and they see, oh, it's time to go vote. You know, we have the signs. It would be nice to have more room though, because now when I started out as a chairperson, I was the only person ever put a tent up for campaigning. Now there's like three, because there's the nonpartisan, the partisans, and the partisans. So that has made it difficult. I think it would be easier and not be so, confrontatious, if we had more room. On a personal, that's me personally. But like I said, there are some people, Mayor Farrell for one, Commissioner Helms, that says parking has never been an issue there for us that we've seen. So either way, I'm fine either way. I'm not really, either if you leave it there, I would personally be okay. If you move it, I'll find it, and I'll make sure the folks that I converse with will find the place. Okay. So either way, I just want to make aware that we're not complaining personally. Those of my personal friends that go there to vote. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Beaver.
You're welcome.
Any responses from the board? We'll have that, as you know, on the agenda when we get to that point. All right, and as a matter of fact, we're there now, the East Aberdeen Precinct, a discussion and relocation from the American Legion and to New Life Tabernacle, or to remain at the American Legion. Host, Ms. Dixon, I'll let you begin.
So I had sent, I'm sorry, I think I'm sliding in this chair like I need a booster or something. So I had sent the board pictures to do a comparison with the East Aberdeen American Legion, and just to show them different viewpoints of what to look at. And I got pictures because I didn't print everything out, and the audience can also look up there as well. But what I wanted to show the board was, so one of the issues since I've been on the board was the buffer zone. In one of the municipal elections, we were having a problem with the buffer zone. The buffer zone is 50 feet. The tents were actually within the buffer zone. And so I had actually came to this board to discuss the buffer zone, how the tents were actually within the buffer zone. Voters were being accustomed, like just being pounced on. And so during that election time, when I spoke to the board about the buffer zone, and Nick, if you can pick the buffer zone map, because I can't see it from here for me, and pull that up. The board had agreed to move the buffer for us and to place it further over so that when voters came up, they weren't being, because what happened is you have the sidewalk and both the tents used to be on both sides of the sidewalk. And so that way, when voters were coming up the sidewalk, you basically had tents basically just trying to grab at the voters. And so the board agreed to move the tents to the side. And so it worked. The voters were happy with that. We rolled into another election, the primary, and then we rolled into the general elections. And then that's when we actually had a problem. We had to actually send Nick out there. We had to actually write an incident report out there because an altercation actually took place within the buffer zone. And I had the incident report. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to find another location for this site so that the tents would actually have spacing where they could have room. They wouldn't be on top of each other, because in another municipal election, there was an incident where the tents were combating for space, and a candidate was actually sitting on the porch trying to hand out information because they were fighting over the spacing with this location here. And so I wanted to show the board this incident report and have them to read it of what was said. And if you could just take one and pass it down. And so in this report, we had a candidate. One of the people were outside in a tent and they were complaining about the buffer. And we needed to move it. By the time you take up a curbside spot, because it has to be ADA compliant, you cannot put handicap and a curbside spot on grass. The only spot that you can put that is on the street. Everything else around the American Legion is grass. You would have to put matting out there, and matting is expensive to make it ADA compliant. Because if you was to have a person in a wheelchair and on a walker come out there and fall, we, as the Board of Elections, would be liable. So the only place that you can put ADA people out is on the curb, which takes up 2 of your parking spaces because there is no other place to put it. You can't put it on North Pine Street because it's not marked. Because are you going to have somebody actually take paint and mark the street out there? No, because your handicap accessibility, because there's a curve in the street where they can actually go up with a walker or a wheelchair, is on the main strip. So that's where you would have to place it. And so this incident report took place because of the tents being out there. And so that was one reason why I wanted to find a suitable location, because of this incident report right here. Also, from the last meeting, when I had put out there about looking for a suitable location, Mr. Holland did say that there was shortcomings out there with the East Aberdeen precinct about the building size, about the buffer zone, and that it was not a very good location for the tents. And so for the past 3 years, I have been looking for a suitable location due to everything that you see right here. So this is not something that I have just been on the whim doing. I have been doing this for the past 3 years, looking for a suitable location. I remember he said something about the Crestline Fire Department. For one, I wouldn't have put it out there because of 211 and the expansion. That's one. The second thing is that fire department is actually in another precinct, is in the Pine Dean precinct. Pine Dean and East Aberdeen, they kind of intertwine with each other. And going by the precinct maps, you have to be very careful because they actually overlap with each other. The newer precinct is actually straight down the street. I mean, it's just straight down the street. You would just have to put a flag or an A-frame and point it down. So it's not that far of a distance from where the old precinct is to the new precinct. Also, another thing with this one, this place only has a maximum of 50 people allowance with this site. So 50 people maximum, and this is probably with nothing inside. So Nick, if you would pull up, I had sent the board pictures of the Legion. They leave all of their things inside, the chairs, their flags. They try to put it on the outside of the framing of their building. So by the time we place our equipment in there, we can only place 4 booths in there. So you have voters who have to wait on the outside of the building until we can allow those people who are on the inside to vote and come out. It's taking a very long time for people to have to vote. Let them come out and let some other people come in. And like I said, on the paperwork that I gave you, 50 people maximum. That's it. That's allowed to go into that precinct to vote. I also showed you, because I have to do all of the GIS coding for all of the county. You have 4 brand new subdivisions that's coming out. And each time Carrie gives me a DMV update, I'm actually putting brand new people into these new subdivisions on the regular now. They're getting registered into these new subdivisions. You have one out there on 211. You have a new one right behind Devonshire, which is right behind Carrie's house. You have a new one out there on PV Road. So they're coming into the neighborhoods as we speak right now. So 4 brand new subdivisions are actually coming into that area as we speak. I actually have a total of 2,854 registered voters. I don't think that's right. It might be more than that, but 2,854, give or take, registered voters as we speak. And Is that my note?
It's the numbers.
Oh, can I please have that? Because I'm like, that don't look right. I'm sorry. Thank you. So for East Aberdeen, I'm sorry, yeah, I have 3,294 registered voters in that precinct as we speak, with 4 brand new subdivisions coming up on me now. And with 50, only a maximum of 50 in this precinct, in that building, that's not suitable. The law says I have to have a building that is able to contain this number right here, and I'm already in violation.
Excuse me. You have to be able to contain 2,000 people in a building?
So if everybody in this precinct was able to come to that location to vote, I wouldn't be able to vote them.
You can't hold all the registered voters of any precinct in their
So
voting
the way the law states is if I have to be able to have a location that is suitable enough that if this many people was to show up to vote, I have to be able to have a building that is suitable to vote them.
at one time.
Mm-hmm.
No, that makes no sense.
No, through the date. It would be through the date.
Like through the
Yeah.
day, yes,
People might be staying there 2 to 3 hours.
but
To
through
get
the
in.
day, yeah. So
Through the
that,
day.
yes, ma'am. So that's why that you have to be able to maintain your precinct. So they give you the opportunity where you can split precincts and all this other kind of stuff. But if this building is only allowing me 50 people maximum, I'm still out of compliance because I can only hold 50 people. But
At a
that's
time.
50 people, that's what right there, it says it in the yellow, 50 people maximum in this building. That's it. But that's without any furniture in it. But I have to have I have to make sure that I have adequate voting equipment in this building too. It's hard to put my voting equipment plus their furnishings in this building at the same time because there's nowhere for me to store their stuff and my stuff at the same time. And they're nice enough to try to put it out the way. They stack it against the wall. But by the time I say I bring 4 voting booths, a table for the ADA equipment because I have to have that up. And then we have to have a table because you can't have everybody standing. You got to have some sitting room. We're already tight. And then, like I say, most of the time, by the time I fill up the voting table, the voting booths, and I have 2 people maybe sitting at the table, we have a person that's sitting at the provisional table. I can't put no more people in there. So they're waiting on the porch until all those people come out so I could bring some other people in. So, like I said, I've been looking for some place because I lived in this precinct as well when I lived over here as well. And even when I have to go down there when there's an issue, I park on the grass. My poll workers park on the back side of the grass. And then what happened was they built the memorial on the other side, which took away some of our parking as well when they built the memorial. So that didn't help when they did that. So that, it kind of took away the parking on the opposite side when they built the memorial, which I'm not, my dad was a veteran, so I'm not saying anything about that. So this is not a suitable spot as that area continues to grow. And I was showing you the growth with the subdivisions that they're placing out there. I was showing you how, from the aerial view, about the parking, and at least 2 of those parking spots are already taken because ADA requirements. I have to make sure that there's firm footing for curbside and handicap. Most times people kind of park further up the street and come down because by that time, if you have the grass side taken and the back side taken, there's no other place to park.
Is the curbside voting on Main Street or Pine Street?
Main Street.
Okay, so it's actually in the street. As I'm looking at the picture on my computer here, you got the parking spaces laid out. So does it take up those parking spaces?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I'm looking at the buffer zone, there is no place to put tents outside the buffer zone. There
Okay.
just, there isn't anything, any place to put it in. You know, you could, at the very bottom down here, you might be able to put a tent on the east side, another one on the west side, but each party's going to say, and whoever the candidates are that are having their tents, they're going to want a tent on each side. So the traffic that comes from the east is going to be able to go by the tent. And the traffic coming from the west, they're going to want people to go by their tents. So now we've doubled the tents. Even that, I don't see the room here for the tents.
No,
At all,
the
and then-
max that you can get there is 2, that's it. And
Mhm.
whoever gets there first, that's it. And that's usually what happens. I mean, they're like fighting to get there first, and once they get there, that is it. So then what happens is then you get somebody who illegally puts a tent on a side that they're not supposed to be on. And then there's a little bit of words there. Nick, if you can find me I think I have a picture of the new location, a buffer zone map. Maybe. And I can pass this one down. Now, with the newer location, with the buffer zone map, because of how it's located, you can actually put tents all right here in this first section right here, and you can actually space them out. You can put actually 4 tents for each party represented right there. And it doesn't interfere whatsoever, because you have all of this parking and all of this parking. And I gave the board an area view. There's parking all the way around to the back of this church. And it doesn't affect curbside. It doesn't affect the parking, because like I said, there's parking all the way towards the back. But this can actually be designated as for the tents for them. And it's plenty of space to at least put 4 tents if you want to, designated for them.
Can you
Stacy?
indicate where the curbside is?
The curbside will actually come under the shelter. It's a curve.
Okay,
It's actually a curve.
I see.
And then you can actually work handicap. We can put the handicap will come over there. There are 2 spots for handicap.
I'm trying to imagine in the illustration that you just held up, where folks from various parking areas where they would travel or walk in order to get to the entrance of the building. Which you pointed out the area for tents, is it likely that folks would have an opportunity to pass by all the tents?
Yes, sir, right here.
Okay.
They
As
have to
opposed
come up this
to like
way.
the picture.
They come up this way, or they can come up that way, but this way or this way.
Because in some of our,
Now I'm confused. I thought, so when you look at the semicircle,
Yes, ma'am.
the bottom of the semicircle is where you're saying the tents would be.
Mm-hmm.
And just to the left of that is the curbside.
So they can pull up further to come in, but
Your curbside traffic is going right by the tents.
yes,
And people aren't going to be walking in to vote that way.
yes,
So you're going to have the people in the tents, you're going to have curbside people driving in, and you're going to have people walking in the same area to go
Yeah.
inside to vote.
yes, because you have to come through the front. That's how you get into it. That's
But
the
isn't-
entrance.
isn't the front entrance would be like, let's pretend it's a map, coming from the northwest corner toward the building. So where that little cutout is in the semicircle, is that the main entrance?
Yeah.
All right, so if folks come in there from that parking lot, then they're not going to be going by the tents that are in the grass below
Okay,
the semicircle,
so
unless I'm really misunderstanding.
right here, you would put the tent. This is all the parking for everybody that's voting. You come and you can put people parking. You can put like poll worker parking, but you have to come this way to get into the building. Does that make sense?
And that's similar to what it was at Pinehurst, at their rec center, that all the tents were on one side. You had parking that kind of went everywhere, but the tents were all together on one side. And if people wanted to come from the far side of the parking, they would have to walk over to the tent. And it's almost the same kind of location where you just showed it right there. And it seemed to work at Pinehurst Rec Center.
I know we can't wave a magic wand and make all the sites look like this, but for our 2 early voting sites at the Ag Center and at the Aberdeen Lake Rec Center, pretty much everybody, wherever you parked, walked by all of the tents in order to get to the entrance. So, that's, again, you can't arrange, I acknowledge that you can't arrange that everywhere, but.
Or the only other place is you put them in the grass right here. But like I said, I mean, if you want to put them in the grass right here and cars parked there.
I don't see where you have it on the
Well, I don't
screen.
see your point of.
So he put the tents in the grass area right there.
And then what about on the other side? That grassy area up there for, if you were worried that people were not going to go by one set of tents, you're back to the 2 sets of tents situation on either side.
I mean, you could put one group here. one
Nobody's
group
gonna
there.
walk by the one at the top.
Huh?
Nobody's gonna be parking in a place where they're
It
gonna
shouldn't
walk
be,
by
you're
the
right,
tents
you're
at
right,
the top.
shouldn't be.
Well, here you would do handicap parking. So this is where most people, I mean, this is handicap, but you have people coming here. But you could put someone here because you can get, but on this side there's a ramp and on this side there's a ramp to come into the front because the voting is here. It's right in the front. Does that make sense?
I think we just need to acknowledge there is no perfect precinct place to vote within East Aberdeen. I mean, we've even talked about down there at the old gym at Freedom Hall, same situation. That 50-foot buffer goes right out into the middle of the street. There is no place really to put people for the tents and all. It's the same kind of situation. I mean, trade-offs, any way we look at it, there's going to be trade-offs on whatever site we go to. And I think if we're going to do trade-offs, we need to be at sites that are bigger, that can handle today's population, where we see the population coming in the next couple of years or more.
But this room actually has more of, like almost a 200, almost, you can hold like 200 people in this room.
Now, an option would be, since we've got the municipals coming up right now, that we do this site. We could even say it's a one-time only, see how it works for the municipal election. If we find too many problems with the municipal election, then we have to go back to the drawing board before we get to the 2026 election. But we've already kind of, I think,
Well, I would make a counter proposal to stay where we are and continue to study it, because in the municipal, the volume of people voting is not going to be that high. So staying where we are for the municipal should be perfectly fine. And we continue to look for a place that's going to handle the volume. We don't want to be switching the locations back and forth. That's just going to get more people upset and confused and not know where they're voting.
That would also allow for a little more time to educate the voters in the East Aberdeen precinct, as far as there's, once we get some lead time, if we decide to move it either to the church or somewhere else for a public education campaign, more than what we've got between now and the municipals.
But what education? Because the only thing you have to do once you move a location, you just have to send out a notice. And we go beyond that. We send out 2 notices. We will send out an early notice and then a secondary notice. And then once we have to do the, we will send a notice in the paper as well when we notify the voters in the municipality of the election. We put that notice in the paper. That's all you have to do.
I understand what the statutory requirements are. I'm just looking out for, as you said, that we already do, to go above and beyond that, to ensure, for the sake of the voters, that there's a smooth transition to the new location.
And then what we would do is at the old location, we would put signage to let them know that the location has moved and point them into the direction of where the new location is.
Right, understood.
Things, we've already had problems with people having to do provisional ballots because they came to the wrong precinct to vote. And these precincts have been here for quite a while. So, I mean, you know, we put the notices out now and people still go to the wrong spot. Again, no easy solution. I'm still trying to go back to the American Legion. In the past, you kind of put the tents within the buffer zone.
Yeah, they were in the buffer zone.
Okay, if we say, no, it can't be in the buffer zone, we're not going to allow that, then we have to figure out what is the spot we're going to put the tents. And if there's going to be hate and discontent from the people in the tents, it's going to be like, well, here's the situation. This is the only place there is because we're at this location.
I don't particularly like this solution either because I've experienced it over at the Boys and Girls Club location, though. It was deemed that there was no adequate room to put up tents. And so electioneers had the option, and what they did was to have tables without the tents, which take up less space. That might be a solution for it. It's not, like Marty said, we're not going to have, exactly right. But that, you know, that's not a decision that the board has any control over. But it's a way of making that the current site in East Aberdeen more manageable, staying out of the buffer zone. I didn't quite follow all the suggested accommodations for curbside voting and for the handicapped access, but it seems to me that those issues could be addressed at the current site. In the smaller anticipated.
But the thing is, eventually you're going to have to move that site. I mean, I know you're trying to hang on because even at East Aberdeen, you have to keep the door propped open because of ADA, because of the way that that door is situated. That door is propped open because of ADA. So eventually, I mean, I know you're trying to hang on to it because you don't want to go to the church for whatever reason. But eventually, you're going to have to move that site. If you can find me a site, that'd be perfect. That is ADA compliant, that has the proper door appendages where a person who's in a wheelchair can actually open that door where it not bucking against them as they're trying to open the door because they're in a wheelchair. That has it where they have the parking where it's not on, they can get to it because it's actually asphalt and not on grass. When we go out to different locations, we have a survey that the state board requires us to fill out that basically tells us what type of ADA requirements we have to look for. So that's why we can't just go to every location and use it as a polling place if it doesn't meet certain ADA requirements. It's very strict with us when it comes to the state board. And so eventually, like I said, we're not going to be able to stay in that building for long.
When you looked at Freedom Hall at one time, did it meet the ADA requirement? I know it's got a ramp going up. Did it meet the ADA requirement?
Annie, do you remember if Freedom Hall met ADA requirements?
It has to be a control for the door.
Yeah, so in some cases, now the problem is in some of these buildings in Moore County, ADA wasn't as big. And then all of a sudden it became big. And so then you have to put certain things in place. So that's why I said with the American Legion, you can't just put, excuse me, it's an older building.
Like, I can't remember specifically. I remember that that Freedom Hall, I know it had a ramp. But other than that, I can't really remember if everything was ADA compliant because that school is really kind
It's older school.
So, but I do remember there was a ramp.
Now, it's got the same, when you looked at that, one of the issues with Freedom Hall was you got the road like 25 feet in front. You had the same buffer issue we have at the American Legion, and we're saying we want to stay at the American Legion. Well, if we can stay at the American Legion with this kind of a restriction.
But the solution was you have to keep it propped. So like I said, when you have certain restrictions that you notice, like when we take our inspectors out to do ADA, because you have to do ADA inspection like every other year, and he says, okay, this is not meeting ADA compliant, then we have to come up with alternatives to kind of bring it up to some type of suitable code. So then it's like, okay, if it's not ADA compliant, then you gotta keep that door prop. Okay, well, if you have a day where it's cold and it's raining, then you have to be careful of your ballots not getting moisture so that it can go through the machine. So then you gotta keep the door propped open. Well, that's not really good for your poll workers to keep a door open, propped open, or you might gotta make sure that your person that's at the door is constantly checking to make sure they're keeping that, making the door, making sure they open the door for people to come in. So that's what I'm saying. Eventually, you're gonna have to move that site. I mean, I know you're trying to put tape on it, but eventually you're gonna have to move that site. And I think Ms. Smith might have had something to say. Did you?
I know you answered my question, because
Oh.
I wanted to go back to, is the site where we are ADA compliant? No, you were answering.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I have another question. So don't we already have some precincts where there are no tents allowed?
Yes, Vast, we have no tent. The Boys and Girls Clubs, there's no tent. Can the staff help me out? Where else there's no tents at?
Oh, that's no way.
West Norwood. Oh, yeah, West Norwood.
Because they consistently try to put it in
On the street, in the handicap spot here.
Mhm.
And put it in the, in parking, and that's
Parking is
dangerous.
scarce.
Yeah, a parking space.
So, I mean, I think it's pretty sad that we're considering moving a voting location because we have an incident report about people who are electioneering. I mean, that doesn't say much for us as a county and as parties who are participating in an election, that we're trying to figure out how to accommodate separating the people who are electioneering because they couldn't get along in a confined space, you know, and I don't see any reason why electioneers have to have space to have tents. If they can't get along civilly in that regard, then I think they forfeited that right. So I agree with you, Tawana. Eventually, we're going to have to do something about that precinct. But I don't think it has to happen for this municipal election. That's my position.
All right, go ahead, Marty.
This isn't the only location where we have conflict over tents. That happens at multiple locations. If you don't allow any tents at American Legion, then the issue is still back to the size inside to be able to handle the voters as they come through during the day. You're no longer worried about the tents out there. But now, how do you police the electioneering within the 50-foot area? Because now there's nobody supposedly electioneering, but now how do you police all that? I mean, I don't know.
No, they can still electioneer. You're just saying you can't put tents.
Pardon?
They can have tables and they can stand out there with a chair.
That's how it works at the Boys and Girls Club.
They don't have tents. That's all.
So they just won't have tents.
Well,
But then it's just now the spacing on the inside where you don't have a lot of people being able to vote on the inside.
If we were to stay at the American Legion, then we got to enforce the 50-foot. That has to be. And then that would cause Hayden to contend, but that's just the way it is.
I agree with
I still don't understand all the opposition against the facility, the church. It's a facility. I know we hear about, some religious overtones, but it's a building. That's all it is. There were some people that were unhappy with West Southern Pines. We did the land trust there. But once again, as I told them, it's a facility that meets all the requirements for voting. That's all I'm interested in.
All right, I think we've had a lot of discussion, so I think I will entertain a motion on the proposal to, well, I get a motion on this topic. Let me leave that. Ms. Dixon has presented the history of the current and future proposed site. She's not making a proposal that a member of the board needs to make a motion.
All right,
And then we'll have, if it's seconded, then we'll have whatever
I'll make a
discussion is.
I move that we leave the upcoming municipal election at the location that it is currently located and work between now and the following election to locate a more suitable site that will accommodate all the things we've discussed.
Thank you.
And
Is it-
what about the buffer zone? That's gotta be in here somewhere.
Well, that's already a requirement.
I mean, the tents.
Well, we really don't have to specify it because it's already in the requirements. You'd have a buffer zone. If there's not room for tents, you don't have tents.
But no, because in our listings, we do specify whether tents or no tents.
Okay, so
Right.
then I would add to my motion that we don't allow tents at that voting location.
Is there a second? I second that. Is there any further discussion? All right, on Ms. Powell's motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
I mean,
No.
Tony? All right, well, we were 2-2 with an abstention. I don't recall having this impasse before.
I'm too busy writing.
I understand. Well, what I think what we need to do then, there's an inconclusive vote at this point. That motion did not pass. I'll ask if there's another motion on this matter, at which point, if it's seconded, then we can have another discussion period. Is there another motion on this topic?
Then we move the location to the New Life Tabernacle Church.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
second.
All right, any further discussion? Ms. Kelly? Since you said that you wanted to have a conversation before we,
Yes.
I know you want to take, that's important. I
Okay,
appreciate your
Dedication
to that, but what,
just for my clarity, because I'm doing this. When we stay at the American Legion, just for the municipal, correct? And not for the general election?
that's
That
what,
was
Is
the,
that what we're
that was the
talking
motion.
about
That was the
right now?
motion.
That's the motion? Okay.
that was Holly's motion that did not pass because it was 2-2 tie.
And my extension.
Yes.
I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So, but now, any further clarification?
No.
Any other discussion? All right. Now, the motion that's on the floor now is Mr. Carpenter's motion that we move East Aberdeen polling site from the American Legion location to the new Tabernacle location. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
No. All right, well, in effect then, if that motion is not passed, then by default, unless somebody would like to point out where I'm wrong, then the voting site for East Aberdeen will remain at the American Legion Hall, at least until through the upcoming municipal election. And after that, we will take up what we need to regarding future growth and future voting sites.
Now, you won't have time because after the municipal, you go into a primary in March.
All right,
Well, but we have from now until then. It's not like we're just gonna abandon it.
we don't have, well,
But I have certain time frames to do certain things. That's what I'm saying.
I understand. And I think if you clarify those for us, then we will work with them then.
Okay.
All right, next item on the agenda, another precinct, the Eastwood precinct, Ms. Dixon.
So Eastwood did email me. They did meet with their elders of the church. And I think their general concern was that they didn't want anyone to think that they were supporting a candidate at their church.
Supporting a candidate?
So they declined.
Okay,
So, and then in the Eastwood precinct, there is really nothing else out there. The good thing is the fire department just paid, which was great, just paved their parking lot out there. So that did kind of help at the Eastwood Fire Department. So, but their main concern was not letting the church be associated. They didn't want the church to feel like they were associating with particular candidates. So they
Understood.
declined that offer.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Dixon?
So staying where it is
For right, yeah.
So the
for right now.
recommendation of the
Okay.
staff and the,
And-
is,
and-
yeah.
Yeah,
everything's okay there. Okay.
Okay. This precinct is not listed explicitly on this agenda. However, we had 3 sites that we had earlier considered. The third was Whispering Pines. So Ms. Dixon, is there any movement there?
no, nothing came up.
Okay, so therefore, our assumption then is that in Whispering Pines, it will also stay at the same location?
Yeah, because I haven't had it, haven't found anything. for
Okay,
that.
understood. It's clearly not an easy job. Number 3 on the agenda, disruptive behavior resolutions for the board meeting. Ms. Dixon?
Okay, so this came about, so there was, so we had an incident down during the recount with Ms. Mangrum, with a staff person. And so we had to call the sheriff to handle the situation. But then after that situation took place, we were having a meeting up here, and it wasn't during a public comment period. It was, the board was having a meeting. We were trying to finalize some information, and I think it was during a canvas probably period or something of that nature. But at that time, there was some disruptions during the meeting, and we were recording, and it the talk was going on between Ms. Mangrum and another person in the audience. And so we had to make mention of the fact that this disruption was going on. And then Tony also noticed it, and then we had to get Bob's attention to kind of put the disruption down again. And so that being said, it was brought to the attention of the county attorney. And so the county attorney had reminded me about making sure that during the meetings, that we make sure that everything is done in decency and order, that there are no disruptions during the meeting, and that with Miss Elizabeth, that she also knows that she doesn't disrupt the meeting and things of that nature, because it was brought to her attention as well. And so, and this took place, like I said, she brought it to my attention because I really kind of forgot about that it had happened. And so she had asked me to like draft a resolution so that when people come to the meeting, they would know where the board stands concerning disruptive behavior when it comes to our meeting. So I was in the process of drafting a disruptive resolution and what those details were. And then when I sent it to her, she was showing me what the county commissioners use. And so she was working with me on that. And so it was something in their public comment period policy, and it was a general statute that they use. And so when I was going forth with that, I said, well, we do have a public comment policy, but in our meetings, we have a different general statute that tells us how we're supposed to maintain order with disruptive behavior. And so I sent that to her. And so when she read the general statute, which was and that's also attached for the board, when I gave her that general statute, which is the 16334, she said that general statute was basically better for us to let everyone know that was in attendance for a meeting, that gave the board more authority for people to realize that this is what the board stood for, this is what gave the chair the authority to do what he needed to do, along with the secretary, to maintain order when it came to disruptive behavior. And so this is why she told me to put it in a script, so that way during the meeting at that time, that script would be done and that general statute would be read, and that if anyone would violate the meeting, that that person would be held liable according to that general statute. And in that general statute, it does say that if a person does disrupt the meeting, that they could be removed. I'm sorry, all of a sudden I can't see what I'm. And basically, for us, for our general statute, it's actually jail time and not to exceed 30 days. And also they could get up a fine up to $200. And so due to the fact that we've kind of had issues before, and sometimes these issues have taken place without the board's presence as well. And so this was a way to get things back in focus with the board and also with the staff. So this is for everybody. And so this is why this came about, because of issues that we were having. And so this is why this was brought to the attention of the county attorney and the board.
So
Thank
the
you.
county attorney believes this needs to be read at the beginning of every meeting.
Yes,
And we just have to determine, to me, right after the Pledge of Allegiance would probably be the appropriate time to read this before you start getting anything controversial. Everybody understands the ground rules at that point in time.
yes, sir. And then is to make sure that people are aware, because that way because what happens is, like, if I give this to, like, I have to let, like, my sheriff know, so that way if a deputy comes and they know what this statute is saying, that way if somebody is picked up, God forbid, nobody will be, and they are arrested and this happens, they know what the outcome is. And this protects the board as well, because like I said, in our statute, it talks about jail time.
Okay?
I'll hold my comments for a while until other board members have an opportunity to make a comment or a question.
This isn't something we vote on, right? This is happening. Yeah, okay.
What, I guess that's I have
It's
sort of the same question, and I don't understand that. Let me back up a little bit for context. Ms. Dixon, thank you for clarification of the context and the history of how this came to be and as part of our agenda today. I understand that often a single incident may be often the cause, the incitement, motivation for a broader policy change that is about more than one person, but is reminding everybody who is affected, in this case, by Board of Elections meetings, the board, the staff, the members of the public, the director. I regret that an individual's name had to be, I understand why, but I regret that it had to be brought up in public in this meeting, as opposed to handled in a different way, on an individual basis, more privately. And
I was advised to. I didn't, usually I don't like to, but I was advised to give the background history, and it's just not a single incident.
Mhm.
It's been kind of happening for more than not like days or months, but this has been happening for quite some time now.
I understand, and I also will acknowledge if I, as a chair, was not paying close enough attention to the demeanor and the behavior of members of the public, I apologize for that. I would be surprised, and we can get clarification from the county attorney. First of all, if the only acceptable way for us to move forward is to read this entire statement verbatim at the beginning of every meeting, I think it's important, as I did at the beginning of this meeting, to remind everyone present of the appropriate demeanor and protocols for an orderly and responsible and civil engagement, regardless of any differences of opinion. And I think it's certainly possible for me to pay attention to what's going on among the members and all those who were attending the meeting, and to try to make it reminders of appropriate decorum, short of threatening to have someone arrested and given a $200 fine and put in and incarcerated for 30 days. It seems a more aggressive way to set the tone of a meeting than is necessary based on what is generally the tenor and the tone of the meetings that we have. It's, I think, for the most part, governed by civility and mutual respect. And so I would hope that there would be a version of this statement that Ms. Leland has recommended to us that would prove to be acceptable not only to her as the county attorney, but to the members of the board. This is the first that when you emailed this document to us a couple of days ago, the first that we've seen it without an opportunity to share our ideas with you and among each other. Another version of this that meets the intent would be more suitable for opening our meetings than this exact statement. It's good to know this exact statement. Thank you very much for outlining my responsibility and authority, but I would prefer to open the meetings in a different manner.
Well, I tried to give a different statement because at first I was like, ooh. And so the first statement that I did give her, she was like, that does need work. So I did try to kind of tone it down. And then when I gave her the statute itself, she was like, just use the statute. And I was like, okay. So I did try to tone it down because I did think that it was harsh too. Because I don't know, I've seen, you know how you see something, but you never really see it. And I didn't realize that it did say that. And I did try to pick it apart as well when I first did it. And so she felt like that this was better than what I gave her the first time.
Well, it's basically the law.
Basically,
Now,
that's the
if
law.
we don't want to read it at the beginning, we could post it out there and have a copy for people to take to read so that they're aware. And at the beginning, you say, you've been given kind of a code of conduct for the meetings. Please review this so you're aware of what can happen. Now, let's face it, we had some problems at the Moore County Board of Elections in the past, and people got arrested. And so this is not anything new. We're coming up. We've been fortunate. We really haven't had anything serious go on with the Board of Elections. But I think making people fully aware that if you are disruptive, you can go to jail for 30 days. That warning, I think, is absolutely appropriate. But we don't have to read it. I agree with you. Reading that maybe not be necessary, but as long as they're aware of the statute by it being posted and maybe having people take a copy, then there's nobody can plead ignorance.
That sounds reasonable. Just as we do with the policies for public comment, there's a full page right about there, and it's in the stand over there. So I have a very brief synopsis of the key points that I read at the beginning. Could do something similar with demeanor during the course of the meeting, full text at the sign-in table with copies available for clarification.
Her main thing was just was to make sure that that it was that making sure that if anyone was to disrupt what the board was doing, that it would be taken care of. that you would not allow anyone to disrupt. the meeting.
Understood. I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments from Ms. Dixon or on this topic?
So I guess the question is, do we need a motion to have this go into effect, or do we assume that's the way it's going to be from now on at all our meetings?
So what are you trying to
The
do?
agenda says disruptive behavior or resolution. So do we need a resolution? Do we need to vote on it? as a
Well,
resolution?
from what, so the clarification would be, it was a resolution, but then it didn't, it's not a resolution, it's basically an acknowledgement. So, so that was the difference. It got changed from a resolution to acknowledgement.
So how about if we have a motion that says we're gonna post it and make reference to it at the beginning of every meeting and make sure attendees can get copies? I so move.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. Number 4, observer rules. And there was a lengthy numbered memo from the State Board of Elections that we received copies of earlier this week. Ms. Dixon.
Yes, sir. So, the reason why this was brought up, because there were some concerns, from board members, with the email that was, asked to be sent concerning Ms. Keisha, Donahue's email. And basically, the concern was with a lot of some of the, not suggestions, I about lost the wording, some of the things that she did mention. And so the board members were just like, we didn't have an opportunity to really just say, okay, we will look into some of the things that she said. I know with one incident that took place where she referred to the vast location having like a racial incident that took place. And so they just wanted to we wanted to get more feedback and to basically address those issues and put the board members at ease. And so this is why we pulled incident reports, we sent it to the board. We kind of wanted to do some comparisons concerning those matters. Comparison to what she stated, comparisons to what the observer rules were, and comparisons to the fact that a lot of the things that she stated really did violate a lot of what the observer rules were. And so I wanted to just go and discuss those things with the board, see if the board had any anything they wanted to discuss. After going through a lot of these incident reports myself, because some of these were the first time that I actually did see a lot of these things. The observers really didn't even give the chief judge an opportunity to do their jobs before they were reporting on them concerning matters that was just, I would like to say nitpicking to a degree. Because like one of the incidents that she mentions was at St. Anthony's, which St. Anthony's doesn't even allow signs to be placed on their property during election day. I had shown the 2 incident reports from the chief judge there where he contacted Kerry to remove some signs because one of the priests had actually noticed that there were signs out on the property. And then where the chief judge had actually contacted me concerning a sign because one of the candidates had placed a sign out there. And I told them to remove the signs because there's no signs that are allowed out there. And so the observers just weren't allowing our judges to do their jobs before they were even just stating things. And I don't think it was fair. And so that's why I was just like, if the board would just familiarize themselves about the do's and the don'ts, and then kind of compare it again to what Ms. Casey said. There was just a lot of violations. Observers going up to voters, trying to basically show them what they could and couldn't do when it came to voting provisional or filling out exception forms. That was not the job of the observers. We did reach out to a lot of the judges to see exactly what took place in a lot of our precincts. A lot of the judges did write back to us, explaining what took place. Some people had really good observers that just sat there, may have asked questions, because they weren't really sure about the process. You had some observers who showed up, they weren't on the list, they weren't supposed to be there, and then they were running off somewhere else, trying to go to another location, trying to see what was happening. Some were just asking questions, wanting to help, and that's not their responsibility. And I do believe that it was a problem all over because of the Senate bill that I also had placed on your agenda that was that's supposed to be coming out, where observers will now have to be trained. They will have to sign an oath sheet, basically stating that they understand what their responsibilities are when it comes to being an observer now. I'm not quite sure who's supposed to be doing the training, but the state board is going to be giving that material out to the observers, making sure that they know what it is that they're supposed to be looking for. A lot of times observers come into our facilities and they're all over the place. They're not sure exactly what it is that they're supposed to be looking for. And it really just made it very stressful for my coworkers, whether it was a judge or a chief judge. And so I just thought it wasn't fair to my judges or my chief judges to not be taken, that their stance wasn't taken first, or they weren't asked to see, or they weren't asked what happened before Ms. Keisha's email. Because I try to explain what took place or what could have happened, and I just don't think it was fair. Looking at some of these emails that they sent back, and I can pass some of these along. Like I said, some had very good observers, and some didn't. Some of them, they had to keep telling the observer to please sit down, to not come behind the station, to not look at people's personal information. Numerous times, one location, they were basically about to send the observer home, as many times that they had to keep talking to the observer. And so, and like I said, I would not have really realized or looked into it until it came down to looking at Ms. Keisha's email to see that there were some things that took place. And so I kind of wanted to do a deep dive to know exactly what took place and what was going on at the different polling locations, to make sure, because we spend a lot of time training our people, making sure that they have everything that they need to do a good job. And so it was kind of odd to see what she had wrote, and no one else really said anything. And so to get this information from the different judges and to see the different comments that was written, and then like I said, to look at the observer rules and the conduct of what the observers weren't supposed to do, there was a lot of things that these observers were doing that they were not supposed to be doing.
So we're going to be, the Board of Elections is now going to be training
So there's
observers from both parties?
So no, not the Board of Elections. So there is a Senate bill out basically stating that observers, before they can even step foot into a polling place or early voting site, they have to be trained. They're going to have to get a certificate. And basically, I guess we will get the certificate basically stating that they have been trained, that they will have to take an oath about their, basically saying that they understand what their role is going to be as an observer. And I'm going to ask Carrie, do you know what more is going to be? Have you read more of that bill? Do you know what else you saw in it?
Badges, but we already
Mm.
provide badges.
Mhm.
That was in addition to the training and the.
Are we going to hold hard and fast if a person is listed from the party as an observer and that person doesn't show up and somebody else comes in? We tell that person they're not allowed in there because they're not on the list?
So
You know,
most,
there's no sense having a list if you're not going to.
so
adhere
most
to
of the
it.
time, we always get a list of who is going to be an observer at every location, and we send that out. And so all of our precincts always get the list during training, excuse me, not during training, during, Annie, please help me out, during pickup of who has an observer, and usually about what Pacific time. Now, it may be that they sent it late, but there's usually a cutoff with that. And so they'll call us, the judges will call us and say, hey, I got this observer here and they're not on my list. And we'll check our list to see if they're supposed to be there or not. And we'll talk to that observer and they'll say, hey, I'm sorry, but I don't have you on my list. Are you supposed to be there? Some people, a friend will call and say, hey, I'm observing at this location, you want to come? And a friend would just show up and try to observe with their friend. And I did have that happen. I'm like, you can't do that. Your party was supposed to choose you to come and observe at this location. So I did have that taking place. I did have an observer that once she caught my name on election day, she called me almost every hour on the hour, trying to talk to me the whole entire time. Even when we were back here trying to have meetings, she was trying to talk to me. And I was like, ma'am, I really can't. Like, I'm here trying to have a board meeting. And she was like, well, they're doing this. And I'm like, ma'am, please, if you could just write a report and send it to whoever, then they'll send that report, to me, and then we'll handle it like that. But a lot of it was them not understanding our processes on how things are supposed to be done. A person has the right to either, they can do a provisional or they don't have to do a provisional if they choose to either say, because this was the issue, some people were like, well, if I do this provisional, is my ballot going to go in that box to be counted today? And I'm like, well, no, because you didn't do this or that. Oh, no. I live right around the corner. I'm going to go get what I need to go get. And so as soon as they saw that, they will chase after the person and they're asking them questions. That's not the observer's job. Now, I can see if I came up and I'm checking in and I didn't show ID and they let me vote. Now, that's their job to report that, because that's a violation. But they were chasing after people. Or I was coming out of Carthage and I seen somebody chase after a couple to see if they let them vote or if they gave them a hard time because it was a Black couple. And and I'm right behind them and they're asking them these questions. And I'm just like, ma'am, like, why are you asking? Like, what's going on? Like, I was right there. And they said, oh, no, I'm just trying to make sure that they didn't have a hard time. And I'm like, but that's not what you do as an observer. And then I had some observers on the inside, they didn't know what questions to ask. So the one lady, you know, she was nice about it. And I said, okay, I had to like explain processes to her, like, okay, this is what we do and this is why we do it. Or at night when we were separating the ballots and we were putting it in order, this is why we do this. We're doing an audit. Oh, okay, I didn't know. They thought, I don't know what she thought, like we were taking the ballots and I said, no, ma'am, this is an audit. We go from each machine, and I had to explain this stuff. And so, because she kept going to the site manager asking questions, and I was like, okay, like, what is it that you're trying to find out? And so there was things like they just didn't know. Like, okay, there's processes that we have to do. We have to audit. We have to do this. But what is it that you're here checking for? That's what you have to make sure that we're not doing something that's shady. Like we're not putting extra ballots in the voting box. That's why you hear us when we come in, we say curbside every time we slip something in. And so they weren't aware of what it was that they were supposed to be looking for. And so now with this Senate Bill 392, it says persons appointed as observers shall complete training before acting as an observer and complete additional training at least once every 2 years as applicable. The state board shall establish training standards and requirements for observers. Now, like I said, I'm not quite sure. Maybe they'll send the information to each of the parties. I'm not sure who's going to be given the training. And then observers shall sign a sworn oath that the observer shall not do any of the following inside the voting place: look at photography, but videotape, or otherwise record the image of any voter's marked ballot, impede the ingress of any voter in the voting place, engage in electioneering. We did have observers actually going out to their party tents and speaking to them and hanging out at the party tents instead of being on the inside. They, just certain things that they were doing that they weren't supposed to be doing. And so we would think that the observer would leave and then all of a sudden they're back, and that kind of would throw our judges off, because we're like, okay, is this a new person or is this the same person? Because they would be under the party tent and they would be gone for like a good spell because they're talking to the person under the tent. And so it's like certain things that they just weren't aware of. Like if you're in the inside, like it's okay for you to go out and kind of hang around curbside and see what they're doing, but then you come back in. But they would be like out under the tent for like an hour and a half, just talking and joking. So it was just different because they weren't sure exactly what they were supposed to be doing.
All right, clearly problems with the observer system in practice as it was conducted in this past election.
And usually I send the training to them though from the state board.
Send the training. In other words, I've seen guidelines that every observer is supposed to have, but I would certainly endorse the notion of the requirement that standardized training that's more formal than that the companies, I haven't had an opportunity to read through that bill, but so that it's consistent, across the state, I assume, and, that both parties are aware of this, and the notion of having a certification and a badge and a list that's adhered to. I'm all in favor of that. I'm going back just a little bit because we've, Ms. Dixon alluded to someone who was not here, Keisha Donahue. For the purposes of just an introduction, she is the first vice chair of the Moore County Democratic Party. She served as what's known as a county election liaison. She met with Ms. Dixon back in the fall about that responsibility. She attended most of our meetings while we were through the fall, through the early voting period. And she received from kind of a clearinghouse of, I imagine it was observer incident reports that were, that had to do with Moore County. Ms. Donahue then compiled those, sent her condensed report to Ms. Dixon and to me, and I asked that that be disseminated among the other board members. And she was unable to be here this evening. She said she regretted that. She has offered to meet with whatever combination of Board of Elections representatives and officials would be appropriate. So I guess that knowing that, I understand the frustration, and I'm not happy and not surprised with the violations that you outlined. I think there was a lot of trepidation about how this would play out when observers became a part of the process and introduced into the system with clearly inadequate training and preparation. Hopefully, then that will change. Ms. Dixon, I'm not sure. I know that you have some reservations and valid criticisms of the way some of the observers acted during the election. I wasn't sure if you were saying or finding something objectionable or inappropriate with the report that Ms. Donahue submitted to you and with a copy to me.
What I was saying was that it's not the job for the observers to try to send a report to say, hey, they need to do X, Y, and Z, because like I said, in the observer prohibited conduct, that's not their place.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
I'm confused. First of all, this isn't the first time we've had observers. Observers have been around for years. It was just that their rules were changed recently so that they actually have more freedom to get up, walk around, observe things, look at everything but a person's ballot, right?
Yeah.
And they can stay after the polls close. So they're seeing people sort ballots, which they don't know what they're doing, which, yeah, if I didn't know what they were doing, that would look weird to me. I would question it. But so they do need training about the whole process. I don't know if we should do this today, and I think we probably should not, but I find it somewhat distressing to hear you say that the things in the written report cause you concern regarding whether observers were doing more than an observer is allowed to do. Because what I read in the report is, here's what an observer observed, and these are issues that we should be sure don't reoccur. They didn't intervene, they observed these things.
No, there were some observers that actually chased after voters to try to help them vote or help them do a provisional ballot or help them do certain things. They did do that.
So they told voters what their rights were.
No, they told voters, how come you didn't do this? Or how come you didn't do that, when they didn't have the whole story behind them speaking to the chief judge at the help desk of what the conversation was about.
Were you passing something down? Because it never got to me.
Oh, it's not that, Bob.
I would say it's
I
nothing.
think we need to have a discussion about this just in general, but not at this meeting.
I would state that it's probably not the job of an observer to go to a voter and start telling them their rights. Here's what you should be able to do and shouldn't be able to do. That's not the job of an observer. We obviously need standardized training. And if the state wants to put together a standardized syllabus, and like it or not, it's probably going to be each county board of elections that's going to have to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to have any consistency. If each party does it, it's not going to be the same training no matter what. It's going to have to probably come from you, and then you'll do the certificate. Now, with that, as with each of the precinct workers, there's kind of a code of conduct. If you're found doing something improper, there are penalties with that. And I think with the observers, probably gonna have to be the same thing. You can't just do things you want to do that interfere with the election process. A lot to do with observers. The concept is great. I have no problems with it as long as they're observing and reporting. And yes, they should be reporting.
Yeah, they
But-
should be reporting, and I don't have no issue with that. It was just the fact that they were actually going to the voter and actually trying to discuss how they should do processes. And that's the problem that I have.
It's a problem. I don't think anybody here disagrees with that.
Mhm.
And
I had a problem with the one comment that the one observer thought they saw racism being applied to one of the voters. Where was that person standing? Did they hear the conversation? Or was it just a subjective analysis by them of the situation because the individual involved was a minority at that time? I mean, I don't know. I'd like the more details on what specifically led the comment that of racism was observed and included in this report that she provided. Let's face it, we had a lot of issues on provisional ballots. And this is the dead horse I beat all the time. There is personal responsibility out there with the voter. It's not like the voters contacted the day before the election. There's an election tomorrow, please show up. You know days, months, weeks, years in advance. So this idea that they don't have photo IDs, they don't know where to go, I have problems with that. That's once again, that's your job as a citizen, as a voter, to know what's going on, to actively participate in this election. So I get concerned, and some of these comments that are made do bother me. I've been around seeing all our chief judges, Republican and Democrat. We have a very good precinct worker group here. And I would have a tough time believing that there was racism going on by either party for an official. But I could be wrong. You know, somebody give me some evidence.
Are there any more comments or questions for Ms. Dixon on this? And I think I don't know if we need any kind of a resolution, Ms. Powell, but I agree with your observation that this warrants further review and discussion, and I think in a format and time to be determined. Is that satisfactory? Okay. Somewhere, there's an agenda. Don't even look at your agenda. We are at, got it. The State Board of Elections holds conferences twice a year that board members are encouraged, or in some instances, depending on how long their tenure has been and when's the last training, to attend. There's one coming up in July, and Ms. Dixon, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, so I kept getting dates wrong. I'm so sorry. So the conference is in July. It is It's July the 27th to the 29th in Wilmington. Only reason why I had given the general statute, because I did have two that had asked whether or not they needed to attend. Now, that kind of confused me because somebody was coming to the board, somebody was leaving the board, I don't know.
Well, since none of us have been official.
We haven't-
Well, I don't know, so I'm
It's
just saying.
difficult.
I've just
So,
barely been nominated.
so what the way that the statute basically read is like, so 6 months, you had that conference, and then 2 years after that, as long as you did another conference, you were okay. So I didn't know who was attending, who wasn't attending. If you could let me know, check your calendar, please. I think I put everybody there. I don't know, because I wasn't sure, but that is the date. It's in Wilmington. That Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday.
Do you know the location?
In Wilmington?
The hotel,
Best Western?
Best Western?
Yeah,
Best-
She said that with a question, so.
No, it's Best Western. Like when she said the location, I was like, Wilmington.
Well, I meant the hotel.
Oh, Best Western.
Are there some hotels that you will go to and some that you won't?
Is it on the beach or not?
on the beach.
Convention's in the convention center.
Oh, okay, yes, okay. That's what threw me. I was like, huh?
I was gonna say,
Okay, so
The convention
you-
center.
in other words, the purpose of this is to call our attention to it. Let you know as soon as we're able to determine by checking our calendars.
Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, voter survey results. Many of you aware that the Board of Elections posted on the website and Ms. Dixon publicized through email a survey for Moore County voters concerning last fall's election and what your experience was like. And so I think we have some preliminary results, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Dixon.
Okay, so there's two types of surveys here. Because the first one that we sent out, if you didn't have Microsoft Outlook, I do apologize, everyone wasn't able to open that one. So we have one that the county employees could open. And Nick, is this the county employee one? Which one is?
One with 55 responses.
Oh, okay, it's the county employee
okay.
one. And then we were able, Carrie was able to create a Google survey, and that's the secondary one, and that has the 170 responses on it.
Right.
That we were able to send out to the county. And I think the pilot and we had some other people that were able to put it like in newsletters, and anyone else that was able to put it out there, they helped us get that one circulated too. So that one had 170 responses. And so it doesn't close until Friday at 5 o'clock, but we just wanted the board to see so far what the responses were. Now, some of these responses, like the One Act, the Save Act or something act that has nothing to do with us. Some of these responses had nothing to do with us. So just bypass that. But we just wanted to see, and some of these were based off of some of the things that Ms. Casey did say too. So we kind of incorporated those questions into the survey as well.
Okay.
The only questions, and this was to help us on the next go round, that kind of didn't get a response to was absentee by mail. That we kind of, I forgot about absentee by mail, to be honest. So this is just either whether you voted in person, either election day or early voting. So that was it. We didn't incorporate absentee by mail. So next go round, we will do absentee by mail in the survey questions next time. Most of the results were positive. Most people were aware that they did need voter ID. Most of the, if the audience, after everything is said and done, wants a copy, I can provide that for you as well, so that you can have one once we're finished. Most of everyone had been, I didn't have too many first-time voters. Most of them were like seasoned voters. Most of the people who answered the survey, hold on, let me see. So from the one that was from the Google one, I kind of had like a even mix of Democrat and Republican, and I'm unaffiliated. From the county one, more Republicans and unaffiliated that had answered. That question. Most people were pleased. There was one question I really didn't understand. I think some people were trying to confuse, and we do stress this point in training about poll workers not talking any type of politics. And so somebody was saying that they thought they heard like a poll worker talking about politics or something of that nature. So that's something that we're going to continue to stress because we don't allow that. We do our best to make sure that we are very neutral. We don't allow our poll workers to get sucked up into any type of conversations or anything of that nature. So that was one thing we did notice. I didn't see, no one really on here answer about voting provisional on here. I didn't see anything of that. One person did mention about going to the Aberdeen Parks and Rec, and they're not aware that when it comes to the county building here and our in lieu of site, we have to be a certain distance away from this building. So there, and I did let them know that because at first we weren't getting a lot of responses, and I put it back out there. When it comes to our in lieu of site, we have to be a certain distance away from this building when it comes to our in lieu of site, and that's actually in our general statute. When you think about the Parks and Rec building and where it's located at, I'm not quite sure who designed that building, but the one problem that we did see, because me and Carrie were discussing it, is because of the way that it's designed, you cannot wrap around that building. It dead ends on the back side of it. So the way curbside worked here, we were able to bring curbside in, come down to the pond, and curve them back in, and then whip around to the front of the building. Here, if you were to try to do curbside at that Parks and Rec building, you literally block everybody on this one whole side, because once you park towards the back of the building, you got to walk all the way around to the front. And everybody that parks to the back actually has to come from the left to the right to get out. Because you can't drive all the way around to the front of the building. If you bring curbside to the front of the building, you block everybody who's parked in the front, because then you got to bring everybody around the front of the building to bring them back out, to get back out to the main street. And so we were like, it would literally gridlock everybody in that parking lot, because our curbside, we had like at least 4 or 5 people just trying to handle curbside out there in that building, just here in Carthage. And so I get what they're saying, but that building couldn't handle curbside. I wish they would have put the building further back and had the parking just in the front, but you couldn't handle curbside out in that building. I'm glad that people did come out there and park and things of that nature. But there were people who actually were happy of how we helped, different people. Like they saw different things and things of that nature. But you can read the comments. Like I said, some of the comments don't have anything to do with us. Some people didn't make anything. Some people thought it was very smooth and easily, depending on what time you came. We did have people, and I thought this is how they did it before, because this was my first presidential election here in Moore County. Because in the morning it was very cool, they would automatically just line up in the building and just hit the hallway. So when I would get there, they were already in the hallway. And I was just like, where did y'all come from? And so we did have an incident where somebody did pass out and had a seizure in the hallway. Yeah. And so we were like, ooh, no. So we weren't very happy about that. I'm very grateful that at that time we did have a gentleman who was actually on leave from the paramedics that was like right across the hall there to help us out. But that wasn't something that we did intentionally. That's just something that the voters did themselves because they came so early and it was so cool that morning. They just took it upon themselves to line themselves up in the hallway. So when I got there, I had to pull everybody out and pull them back outside to not line them up in the hallway like that. So little things like that was like little learning lessons for myself, to let them know you're not supposed to be in the hallway like that.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions on the voter survey? All right, that is the end of my agenda. Anything further from the director or the board? All right, but before we adjourn, I just want to thank everything that Tawana and the staff did in order to prepare us for this meeting, setting up the sound, streaming the meeting on as a live stream for the other folks out there. And thanks to you and the public gallery for coming and attending and staying. And please come back, pay attention, I'm sure you will, to the agendas posted on the Board of Elections website, and make your opinions known in the public comment section in future. We welcome that. There's nothing else. Oops, minute, disregard.
Like a motion?
What, I would love a motion faster than the speed of light.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Miss Holly.
Send it on.